let's talk for a minute about January 6th. It's in 2 days. And to me, it's so obvious the media loves to talk about this. The Democrats love to talk about this. I mean, I think most Americans understand this was a very unfortunate day and episode in our history that we don't really want to keep reliving over and over. The people who were on Capitol Hill that day are being held responsible. They're being prosecuted. And most of us have kind of moved on, right? Trump's no longer in office. If he runs again, we'll deal with that at the voter box, whether you're pro or anti. But like the obsession and the media's, they love it. It's like when we have a puppy. We have 2 dogs. One is 2.5, and we have a puppy. And when we let the dogs out on the lawn, I mean, the puppy, he runs to the dirtiest corner of the lawn, and he just rolls around in the dirt and the leaves and whatever the hell else is in there, and he loves it. He enjoys it. You can see it's like, oh God, Strud. Anyway, that's the media and January 6th. They enjoy it, right? Why do they enjoy it so much?
Well, what's that phrase? If it bleeds, it leads, right? The power and the control and the money that comes from keeping people in a permanent fear loop or a permanent negativity loop of fear, anger, outrage, all of these things, due to the nature of the human condition, which is very sensitive, perhaps more sensitive to negativity than to positivity. These things make money. They garner attention. They get people paying attention, and they also make it easier to push an agenda or to control people. You keep people fighting. You keep people divided. You keep people distracted by various types of nonsense. You refuse to move on certain things, whilst you move on very quickly on other things, which are actually far more important and far more catastrophic and deadly, even in some circumstances. And that's just the way the game is played. I think that it's the way the incentives are laid out. And I don't think it's something that's totally new, but I think it's something that has really become more exaggerated, especially over the past decade in particular.
To me, it's so hypocritical because you see CNN and these other channels completely lionizing the members of the Capitol Hill police who got hurt that day. And they couldn't care less about law enforcement. They said nothing as law enforcement was attacked, hurt, and in some instances killed during the BLM riots of the preceding summer. They didn't care at all. They're just lionizing these guys because they think it makes Trump, and in particular his supporters, not all Republicans, but they've expanded it to anybody who's on the right, look bad. They think it's a chance to make them look bad. And it was not a good day for Trump or his supporters. And maybe not for Republicans either. I don't know. But to me, it's just so hypocritical. And the way they talk about it, there's a woman over on CNN, Juliette Kayyem, right? CNN, she's on. And she was interviewed recently about January 6th. And I would say the way she talks about it embodies the way most of the left thinks about it. Here's that moment. Watch this.
As we gear up for 1/6 anniversary coverage, we're posting my take then. Many criticize this for calling Trump the leader of a terror movement who uses violence or threat as an extension of politics. After a year, I think I was too kind. Yeah. So if you think you were too kind to call him a extremist leader then, what would you call him now?
Well, he continues to be the leader of an organization that uses violence or the threat of violence to disrupt democratic processes. That is terrorism. And I think, we tend to focus on different pieces of the post-January 6th world. So we have the election systems and the states and the fights over states and voting rights. We then have the investigation, the January 6th, and then all the cases that are going on against people who were in the Capitol. But I think we sometimes forget that what sort of connects everything is violence.
That's what connects everything. He's the leader of a terrorist group. And then you got the New York Times weighing in saying, with a headline that reads, this is January 1, every day is January 6th now. Every day. Talking about how Republicans are working to change laws to advance the goals of the January 6th rioters. Hundreds of bills have been proposed and nearly 36 laws have been passed that empower state legislatures to sabotage their own elections and overturn the will of the voters, and go on and on from there. So every day is January 6th. Trump is the leader of a terrorist cult, and this is why he must be stopped. And January 6th hearings and the investigation must go on in perpetuity until somebody, Zuby, somebody other than the actual rioters, I guess, is held to account.
Yeah, I can speak very much as an outsider on this one. I'm a non-American. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I am someone who loves the USA. But one thing with the USA is that everything is so hyperbolic and partisan and exaggerated, and it gets exhausting. Like it gets so much. I mean, it's great that people become passionate about things, but when it's always this us versus them and left versus right and red versus blue and this and that, it becomes I don't know. It's very, very exhausting, especially considering that most people are not sort of firmly in any one of these camps. I mean, the notion that there's only sort of two political views or parties in a country of over 330 million people is mind-blowing to me to begin with. But as someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight, but as someone who has lots of American followers and friends and supporters, I don't know. I just wish that there could be less of this, dishonest, super ultra partisan hackery. I don't think it's good for the nation. I don't think it's good for individuals, and I don't think it's good for the collective society as either, always putting people at each other's throats, whether it's along political lines or racial lines or this lines or that lines. I think it's something that has always existed to some degree, for sure. But it really seems like it's been amping up over the last few years. And I think that if it goes unchecked, then it's going to result in more disruption and more polarization and ultimately in more violence, because there's only three ways you can resolve any conflict. You can talk it out, you can separate, segregate, divorce, or you can physically fight. Those are the only three ways to solve any type of conflict. And when number one is getting shut down and people are not allowed to speak or fearful to speak, or people are being deplatformed or censored or ridiculed or this or that for their very basic and moderate ideas, then that's a problem. And then, unless you want to have a full on secession and split into multiple countries, then you certainly want to avoid two. And so number one needs to always be held open, because otherwise that's when you end up with violence. That's when you end up with these protests turning into riots, which are then turning into people getting murdered and people getting hurt and people fighting in the streets and this and that. And then when you have dishonest people in the media who are just throwing more fuel on that fire, I think it's deeply irresponsible, and I think that it's important for all Americans, whether people are in the media or in politics or outside of it, to just do their best to bring the temperature down a little bit. I feel like the temperature is really, really heating up, and some people would like to try to blame this on one individual or one politician or anything like that. But I think it's actually a sort of collective responsibility and duty for that to happen. But I think that it needs to start at an individual level. And I don't know. That's one of the things I look at in the States. And here, I'm in the UK right now, and in the UK, of course, there are certain issues with politics and with the media and so on, but it's not as hyper polarized and hyper partisan. I think that's something that's relatively unique to the USA in a way.